Hey Panthers, Miss Byrne here, and I am looking forward to teaching you a little bit more about algebra. Before we get started, please make sure you have a pencil and some kind of paper out in front of you to do some work on. Your composition notebook with graph paper would be the most ideal. However, if you do not have that, some lined paper or any paper at all will do better than nothing. Today, there is a worksheet on our activities sheet that you got at the beginning of the week that you will need at the end of this lesson. You do not need it right now. However, it might be nice to have that in an easy place to see it and access it. Today, we will not need our textbook or a calculator. Today, we'll be learning about how to identify parts of an algebraic expression. The vocabulary words that are most important right now are factor, term, constant, coefficient, and variable. At any point, if you hear me use these words, it's very important that you pay attention and really understand what I'm trying to say about them. Some of them are related, all of them are related, so it might be a little bit confusing at parts, but I'll try to go back and make sense of things if it gets confusing. Online learning is new, and I'm sure it's challenging for you. I know it's challenging for me, but there are some things that are awesome about it. For example, I know I have the tendency to speak really quickly. Luckily, in here, you can rewind and rewatch things as many times as you want. Just make sure you don't rewatch it too many times so you don't get sick of my voice, because you're probably going to be listening to it a decent amount in the coming months. Another advantage is that if there's ever something on the screen that you just want a little bit more time to look at, maybe it's a table, a picture, a diagram, some definitions you want to write down, you can take advantage of this by pausing the video. Make sure you're taking your time so that you can really understand what's going on and feel good about your learning. I'm not going to go over too much of this page because I think it should be mostly review. However, I do just want to go over a couple of things. Addend plus addend is sum. I don't use the word addends very often, but I do use sum a lot. Minuend minus subtrahend is difference. I honestly can't think of many times in my entire life I've had to use either of these two words, but I use this word probably daily. So make sure and that's outside of my teaching math. I use that in a regular basis all the time. So please make sure you know what that means. Factor times factor equals product is important for you to know. In fact, factor is one of our terms or one of our vocabulary words today that we're going to be learning. And dividend divided by divisor equals quotient. Because the order of the dividend and the divisor matters, it's really important that you know these words, because even if you look at how things are set up with the signs, these three are pretty similar, but this one is a little bit different. So make sure you really understand what those words mean so that you can move forward and feel confident in your division. I also want to draw attention to the multiplication signs. One of these signs we're probably not going to use as much as the others moving forward. So I want you to maybe think about what sign that might be. It's probably the one you're most comfortable with, unfortunately, but there are a lot of benefits to the other signs, and I'm going to just leave you with that and make you think about it. I'm not going to tell you which sign we're going to bail on here pretty soon. I think you can figure it out, and we'll talk about it another day. The one more thing I want to make sure to draw attention to on this page is that for subtraction and division, the order does matter for their pieces that make their answer. However, for addition and multiplication, the order does not matter. If you see this pause button in the lower right-hand corner on any page, that means at some point during that slide, I'm going to be asking you to pause the video and do something on your own. If it says to do it in your head, then you don't have to write anything down. I know, you love not having to write things down. However, if it says to write it down, you need to make sure you're writing it down because there's some benefit of practice in actually writing down that answer. Here's a great example. So in this case, we're going to do it in your head because it says in your head. If it didn't say this here, we would have to write it down. So there's 3 questions that I'm going to have you pause the video and answer. There's what are the 2 operations where order matters? What are the 2 operations where order does not matter? And what is the order of operations? Go ahead and pause the video so you can answer those questions and then play the video when you're ready to go again. All right, welcome back. So the two operations where order matters is subtraction and division. The two operations where order does not matter is addition and multiplication. The order of operations is parentheses, exponents. Multiplication and division is its own step, and addition and subtraction is its own step. A reminder on multiplication and division and addition and subtraction is that these are from left to right in the expression. You don't always do multiplication first. You don't always do division first. You do whatever is closest to the left-hand side of the expression. Two more words that I want to make sure we're feeling comfortable with moving forward, and I've used both of them, I think, already before this slide today, are expressions and equations. So expressions do not have an equal sign. They include numbers, variables, and operators. There's some examples there if you want to look at them. One operator that I did not show an example of is exponents, but that is considered an operator and should be acknowledged in expressions. The other word is equations. So equations are two expressions that are equal to each other. So that means that they do include numbers, variables, and operators, but they have an equal sign because they are equal to each other. So if you hear me talk about expressions, that means there's not going to be an equal sign. We're just talking about one part of an equation, maybe. If I say an equation, we're talking about the whole thing, what's equal to what. I always remember it because equation has most of equal in the first part of it. So here's one of those times where you're going to get to practice again. I know that because I see this pause button in the bottom corner. So what you're going to do is you're going to rewrite the equation below. I know I have to rewrite it because it doesn't say just do it in your head, and it says rewrite here. So there's two different keys to me that say, okay, I actually have to write this down. So underline the expressions that make up the equation. So the whole thing is an equation. I have to figure out what the two expressions are that make up this equation. So go ahead and pause the video, rewrite the equation, and underline those expressions that you find. All right, so you should have underlined 3x plus 2 and 5y. Those are two separate expressions. They are equal to each other, but they are different expressions, so you should have underlined the two different parts. A big part of this lesson today is going to be vocabulary. So we're going to spend some time going through the vocabulary, and then you're going to have some time to practice identifying the parts of the algebraic expression using the vocabulary that we're talking about. So, factor. One of two or more whole numbers that are multiplied to get a product. So in this case, this is probably a more traditional way that we think about it. The factors, or two factors of 120 are 12 and 10. We know that because 12 times 10 equals 120. We also can use that once we get into algebra and using variables. We're going to get to variables, but variables are letters that represent numbers or values. So 12 times b, that's what this represents, is the same as 12 times b, or 12b is the same as 12 times b. So the factors of 12b are 12 and b. Term. So a term is a number, a variable, or the product of a number and a variable. It includes the operation before to figure out if it's positive or negative. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more during one of my examples. But in this case, all of them are going to be positive because we only have addition happening in this problem. So a number. So, okay, let's see. Why is 3x a term? 3x is a term because it's the product of a number and a variable. So 3x is going to be a, oops, that was weird. 3x is going to be a term. 12 and 18 are numbers. So 12 and 18 are also terms. Oops, wrong color. X is a variable. So it's also a term. So there are 4 terms. Let's write that out. There are 4 terms in this equation. That's beautiful 4. Okay, next one. Constant. A constant is a number in an equation that is not multiplied by a variable or an amount added to or subtracted from the terms involving variables. So when I think of constants, I basically say, okay, what is all by itself that's just a number? So 2 and 12 in this situation are all by themselves. They don't between addition signs, subtraction signs, or equal signs. They aren't paired up with any other value. The other way I think about constants is that if I told you that y stood for 10, that 2 wouldn't change that term of 2 wouldn't change its value, but the term of negative 2y would change its value. It would change from negative 2y to negative 2 times 10. So that'd be significantly different. 4y, the same thing. It would then change its value. 2y would change its value. But 12 and 2 aren't going to change its value as far as its term. The term is not going to change value if our variables are given values. Maybe. All right, variable, a word we've used a lot and haven't quite defined yet, so I'm sorry for that. A quantity that can change. Letters are often used as symbols to represent variables in rules or equations that describe patterns. So if we look over here, we have 2a minus 3b equals a plus 6. One thing that's important to note about variables is if you have the same letter or the same variable, it represents the same value. So I have 3 different a's in this equation, but all of those a's are going to represent the same number. We don't necessarily know what number that is yet, but we know that they're going to represent the same value. B, however, is not an a, so it can represent a different value. But if there was another b over here, it would also have to represent the same value. So these can change. Sometimes you will be given like a equals 2, figure out what this expression's value is. Sometimes you're told to write an equation with a variable for how many hours you work in a week and how much money you might make for the month or something like that. But they're a very useful tool. In this situation, if you were asked what the variables were, you would say A and B are the variables. You don't have to say A, and B, because A all represents the same thing. So you only have to say the letter once, or the variable once. And our last term today is coefficient. So a coefficient is the numerical factor in any term of an expression. So it's what you multiply a variable by. If there is nothing in front of the variable, the coefficient is 1. So in this case, we have 3 highlighted as our coefficient plus 2. But there is an invisible coefficient here. I know, invisible math, crazy talk, right? It's kind of cool though. So if you remember correctly, which I'm sure you do, if you were to multiply 10 times 1, the answer would be 10. 12 times 1, the answer would be 12. 157 times 1, the answer is 157. Miss Byrne times 1 is Miss Byrne. Mrs. Miller times 1 is Mrs. Miller. So J times 1 is J. So there is actually a 1 here because it's saying there's 1J. There's also a 1 here, there's 1J. There's 1 here, that's 1J. But why would I add more when I can j equals 1 times j. So it just adds too much. So there is an invisible coefficient in front of those, but just remember that it's always 1 if you can't see it. So I've left most of the vocab words here so you can kind of follow along with me. But we're going to actually identify the parts of the following equation. I'm going to do this as an example, and then you will get to do the same thing with a new equation after. So the first thing I want to figure out are the factors. And if you remember correctly, factors are what we're multiplying. There's only one place in here we are multiplying things, and it is 8 times x. It's 8 times x. So let's see. Yep. 8 and x are going to be our factors. Our terms are 8x. This is where that negative comes in that's kind of weird. Because there's a subtraction sign here, we're going to call this -2. We do actually use, if there's a plus or minus, we use that to determine the value of whatever the sign of the next term is. So if this is minus, then we're going to call this a -2. And then we have an x, and then we have a positive here. So this is going to be positive 12, which we can just write as 12. There are 2 constants here. There is a -2. Remember, we're going to keep that sign with it. And there's a positive 12. There's only one variable in this case, which is x. And the coefficients of that x are 8. And then over here, there's that invisible 1. So now it's your turn. Here's that pause button again that makes you know that you're going to practice. So go ahead and pause this video at this point, and you're going to identify the parts of the following equation, which is 12h plus 10 equals t minus 1/10 t. Please make sure you find the factors, terms, constants, variables, and coefficients. Go ahead and pause the video now. All right, welcome back. So the factors you should have found are 12 and h, and then there's also another pair of factors, which are -1/10 and t. We have 12h here, 12 times h, and we have negative, because we have to keep that sign, 1/10 times t. There are 4 terms here, 12h, 10, t, and -1/10 t. There are 2 constants. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. 1 constant. Oops, got that mixed up. Which is 10. There's no other constants. Everything else has a variable either attached to it or is just a variable by itself. There are 2 variables, h and t. Even though there's 2 t's here, because they're going to represent the same value, we only need to write that once. But there are going to be more coefficients because, ooh, I messed up. There should be also a 1 there. We're going to add that in right now. And 1, like in basketball. Oh, it's not letting me write. 10. And 1. Okay. So 12 is here. T has that invisible 1 right there. And then we have that -1/10 right there. So that's how I got those 3 values for my coefficients. So you are now going to have a chance to work on your worksheet. You can find this on the learning activities outline for today's date. There are 3 pages to this worksheet. However, I'm going to tell you that you don't actually have to do all of them, and make sure you're following the directions. So you're going to complete the first 2 pages of the worksheet. Definitely finish the first page. If you have time in your 30 minutes, finish the second page. You're then going to check and fix your answers. There is a link for this on the learning activities outline. It's a separate link from the worksheet because I had to make it separately. If you have checked your answers and they're all correct, then you can make any math choice you want. For example, MobiMax, Math Excel. If you want to work on that last page of the worksheet, go for it. But please make sure you're finishing out that 30 minutes. If you did have to fix any answers, I want you to get a little bit more practice. So you're going to go ahead and do that last page as well, and then check your answers to make sure you really understand these definitions. So once again, the first page is required. The second page is required if you have time in your 30 minutes. And then the last page, it depends on how well you do on the first 2 pages. You don't have to print the worksheet. You can either print it or you can write the questions and answers down in your notebook. You get to pick. When you're done, check your words against the answer key just one more time to make sure you got it all right. Make sure you have saved your evidence somewhere safe, as you are going to be turning this in at some point this week. Email your teacher with any questions. Miss Burns' class, you can also use that All Math Classes team that I created for us to ask questions on there. If you have extra time for your 30 minutes, please do more math to finish out the time. You get to pick what you want to do, but please make sure you're using that time. Really important part of today's lesson is give someone at your home an 8-second hug. We all know how important those are. And I believe we're all turning in these assignments on Friday, but if your teacher is having you turn them in each day, please make sure you do that. And I'm going to keep drilling this home. So the expectation is that you're doing 30 minutes of math each day. Please make sure you are doing the full 30 minutes. If you finish the assignment early, make a good choice for you and your math ability to make sure that you are improving your math skills. If you find yourself not being able to complete your math work within the 30 minutes on a regular basis, please let your teacher know. We are trying to figure this out with you, and we just want to make sure that you are being supported by us every way possible. So if you're having issues of any sort, please just let us know so we can work with you, because we know that this is hard and different, and there's a lot of things that we've thought of, but there's a lot of things we don't know until we know. So yeah, I hope you guys are doing okay. Miss you, and I'm looking forward to sharing more videos with y'all. All right, have a great day, friends.